Hello, everyone. Sorry for not uploading. It's been a busy season for me. But speaking of seasons, the NFL season is right around the corner. And because the NFL season is right around the corner, that means the fantasy football season is right around the corner as well. Now, this is my third time recording this, so please forgive me if I do not sound energetic or, if I'm a little bit off. But basically, I'm just going to show you 5 fantasy tips that will help you with your fantasy draft. I hope you haven't drafted already because that would kind of suck watching half of your team get injured before week 1. That would be terrible. Um, Tip number 1, don't expect the best guys last year to repeat. Let's just take a look at the 2024 top 10 players. So this was 2 years ago. Lamar Jackson's number 1, along with Ja'Marr Chase, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jaden Daniels, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, and Derrick Henry. The 2025 top 10 was a little bit different. Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Josh Allen, Jonathan Taylor, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Drake May, Matthew Stafford, and Trevor Lawrence. So, how different, you ask? Well, out of the 10 players that were on the 2024 top 10, only 3 of them repeated to the 2025 top 10, meaning that if you drafted last year one of the players that was in the top 10, including quarterbacks, in the 2024 fantasy season, you would only have a 30% shot at that player repeating that. Let's take a look at with the same numbers without the quarterbacks, though. So just the flex players, because flex players are very important. You got Ja'Marr Chase, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Derrick Henry, Justin Jefferson, Amon-Ra, Devon, Josh Jacobs, and Brian Thomas Jr. Now, take it to 2025. Take a look at that. Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Amon-Ra, Devon Achane, Trey McBride, Ja'Marr Chase. Now, with the flex position, so with the quarterbacks removed out of that list, only 5 of them repeated. So that means that if you took last year a top 10 player from the season prior and drafted them, you would have a 50% shot at that player repeating those same numbers. That shows you a lot. It really tells you that you don't need to, you don't need to trade up if that's possible, trading picks and stuff like that. If your league does that, don't do that for one of the best guys, because chances are they're not going to be one of the best guys. I mean, Ja'Marr Chase went from the number 1 player flex-wise, excluding quarterbacks, to the 10th best player in the flex numbers. So the top player is usually not going to be the top player the next year. That's just not really how it works. Take a look at Saquon Barkley. He was number 3 among all flex players last year. He's not even top 10 in running backs this year. He's not even, or last year. He was not top 10 in running backs after being 3rd in flex positions in 2024. So that shows you so much. And also, I'm just going to repeat it again. Don't trade up, and don't, when you finish the draft, because I don't know if I said my second point. Trust me, it's been a lot of work trying to do this for the 3rd time. Don't, after you exit the draft, go and instantly trade for Christian McCaffrey. Don't do that, because Christian McCaffrey might not be as good as he was last year. So if you trade for Christian McCaffrey and he has a Saquon Barkley type fall off, don't come crying to me, because I already told you not to do that. Because if Christian McCaffrey's what he used to be, great. But if he's not, which the odds kind of show that these players don't really repeat, then you might be in a little bit of trouble trading for him and giving up a bunch of starters. And if you actually end up drafting one of these top guys, please hold a top bargain. Make people actually pay, because chances are you'll win a trade if you get 3 starters in return for Christian McCaffrey. If they're decent, good starters and not just average guys, you'll make a good profit off of the trade. Now let's go to point number 2. Running backs are premium this year. I guess a better way to rephrase this would be the top running backs are premium this year. Let's take a look at the wide receivers first, because to kind of show you the contrast, we need to look at the wide receiver room and the running back room. The main reason why I'm doing this before we get into this point is because in the way my fantasy leagues work, flex players are valuable. I'm basically going to show you how my fantasy league works, and then if your fantasy league is nothing like this, then you can just ignore this video. I participate in 3 leagues. I don't play dynasty leagues. There's no second starting quarterback, so there's only one starting quarterback. There's no offensive player that lets me start another quarterback. Um, Also, there's two starting running backs, two starting wide receivers, a starting tight end, a starting kicker. I think except for one league, there's a starting defense. But if you have a starting defense and not starting defensive players, this video is for you. And if you have one or two flex positions, this video is also for you. So let's go back to the wide receivers. So you got Puka Nacua, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Ja'Marr Chase, George Pickens, and that's like the tier 1 of like the really, really good guys. After that, there's like a 30-point kind of drop to George Pickens and Chris Olave. So I consider those 5 to be the tier 1 of players, the good players that really shine. If you have these guys on your team, you're set. However, that tier 1 is very, very malleable. Because if you look at a guy like Chris Olave that I just mentioned, or Nico Collins, Devontae Adams, Tedder McMillan was the offensive rookie of the year, Drake London at 19, Devontae Smith at 20. A lot of these good guys can be tier 1 if they reach their potential. Matter of fact, let's look at 21 to 25, the bottom 5 players on the spot, and just take a look and consider, can these guys be tier 1? Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Emeka Egbuka, which was competing for the Offensive Rookie of the Year, the number 1 target catcher on the Bucs. Jalen Waddle, the number 1 target catcher on a Super Bowl contending Broncos team. I think the favorite to make it out of the AFC. And Deebo Samuel. That's a very solid bottom 5 in this top 25 last year. Those guys can be tier 1, maybe except for Deebo Samuel, but he's still in a very weak skill position commander's room. If Jaden Daniels is good, that he's practically, him and Stephon Diggs are the only 2 wide receivers he's throwing to that are good. So he'll get a lot of receptions along with Diggs. So you have a very solid wide receiver group this year to where, like, if you don't get Puka or JSN or Amon-Ra, you're not screwed. If your wide receiver 1 is T. Higgins, that's not terrible. If your wide receiver 1 is A.J. Brown, it's not the end of the world. Because those guys can easily be a tier 1 wide receiver. So don't take the top 5 very seriously, because chances are you're not going to be cooked with another wide receiver on this list as your starting wide receivers. But the same cannot be said for running backs. If you look at the top 6, I consider that my tier 1. Christian McCaffrey, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Achane, James Cook. Those are the 6. Those 6 that I think are the tier 1. After that, there are some that are slightly concerning but still good. Chase Brown and Kyren Williams are in 2 offenses that are very pass-heavy, with the Bengals having Ja'Marr Chase and T. Higgins and the Rams having Davante Adams and Puka Nacua. I don't know if Chase Brown and Kyren Williams are going to be able to replicate good numbers this year, but they also were in the same boat last year with tough passing offenses to share fantasy points with. Maybe they repeat, but maybe they don't. It's a new battle every single year. So, Derrick Henry, he's getting older, and I know, the guy has an insanely strong body to where he can have this longevity, but Derrick Henry is not playing until he's 70. Let's just be realistic. I love Derrick Henry, but I can be honest about him and say that it wouldn't surprise me if he started to fall off a little bit by the end of the season, and he isn't what he is. He isn't the running back 1 anymore. Travis Etienne Jr., I know he was a top 10 running back last year, but it did not feel like it when you draft him, and he's very disappointing. He's on a new team now. I don't know how that's going to be. I don't know what role Alvin Kamara is going to play on the Saints. But I can tell you that Travis Etienne Jr. definitely has some concerns. And Ashton Jeanty, maybe with just decent enough quarterbacks, he might get enough carries to where he's good. But he also it has a decent wide receiver quarterback kind of like passing game to complement him. I would say he's a sleeper for this year. But then again, it's not like he had an awesome last year. There are still some concerns with Ashton Jeanty in terms of being a tier 1. But if we look at the bigger picture, if you have the top 15 running backs starting on your team, I would not be critical. I think Christian McCaffrey all the way down to DeAndre Swift, that's good running backs to where that you can start those guys. 16 on, I do not want those guys starting on my team. And I can go one by one and explain them all. Kenneth Gainwell, he's on the Eagles now. maybe he's good, but he's also sitting behind Saquon Barkley. You know, he's not going to be number 16. Jalen Warren and Rico Dowdle share a room in Pittsburgh. Rico Dowdle had a terrible second half of the year that just gets overshadowed by his couple of good games that make up half of his fantasy points last year. Breece Hall, he might be good, but honestly, he's been overhyped so many years now where it's like hard to really even consider him. RJ Harvey sitting behind J.K. Dobbins. Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson share a running back room. Kenneth Walker's on the Chiefs. Everyone acts like he's a top 10 running back. The guy won Super Bowl MVP in a very defensive heavy Super Bowl. So I would not say that Kenneth Walker is like an awesome running back. Maybe he's startable. I wouldn't blame you if you had him starting. You can consider him with the top 15. I feel like he's just a little bit overhyped, though, because last year it was really hard to start him with Zach Charbonnet in the room. Which, speaking of Zach Charbonnet is going to be competing with a rookie. They drafted a backup Notre Dame running back in the first round. That's how much they don't trust you, Zach Charbonnet. I mean, granted, both the running backs at Notre Dame were awesome, but still, the fact that they drafted a backup running back in the first round, to kind of replace you, I don't know. Tony Pollard, he couldn't even average 11 points last year. Yeah. So you want the top 15. I'm looking, and when I draft, for a top 15 running back. And I think the best way to get that is to take running back in the first 2 rounds. Because we just looked at this wide receiver list. I would be okay taking some of these guys that are going to fall in the 3rd and the 4th rounds, because those guys can be wide receiver 1s. I think they can break out this year. Number 3, don't draft the quarterback for as long as possible. I made the playoffs in all 3 of my leagues. And in fact, the easiest league that it was to make the playoffs in, where like there were 10 teams and 8 of them made the playoffs, I didn't draft the quarterback until at least round 8. I'm pretty sure I had like Justin Herbert or something. So, and I got the first seed in that. So it wasn't like I had benefit off of an easy playoffs. I won the championship in that league, and I got the first seed of everybody. And it was a pretty competitive league. Basically, I don't draft quarterbacks until after the first 7 rounds, maybe round 7, depending on, what happens. But if you pick a guy in the first 5 rounds that's a quarterback, you are missing out. Unless you got 2 quarterbacks, that's a whole different scenario. I'm not here to tell you what to do on that. But if you got one quarterback that you can start, don't pick one in the first 5 rounds. Trust me. There have been so many times where I'm just sitting there and it's painful to watch as quarterbacks go off the board. And it's like, am I going to find a good starting quarterback? Yes. Yes, you will. And if it's not in the draft, it's going to be in the waiver wire. You don't need a Lamar or Josh Allen. You need a Jordan Love or a Dak Prescott. You need a guy that's serviceable in the fantasy sense. That's a good quarterback. It's a good quarterback, but it's not going to be like one of the first ones off the board. When you have quarterback rushes, don't follow them, because in one of my leagues, I was able to get both Drake May and Matthew Stafford, the 2 MVP candidates, off of waivers. They weren't even drafted, and if they were drafted, then they got released, So, basically, all in all, to say, don't be that guy that drafts a quarterback early, and don't join the crowd if/when they have a quarterback rush. If they're starting to go quarterback in the 4th round and everyone's trying to get their guy, don't do it. Don't be fazed by a quarterback rush, okay? Be fazed by everybody taking running back in like the first couple rounds. Be fazed by that. Don't be fazed if you have the 10th best quarterback in the league, because that's not going to matter. It's still going to be a good quarterback. Fantasy, the way fantasy works, and I actually like it, they let like 20 quarterbacks, be like good enough to where if you had them starting, you can still compete in your games. There's no reason you need to be taking a quarterback until other people start thinking about taking a backup quarterback. Because you want flex. You want a lot of flex players. You want to draft those flex players as high as you can. Don't waste your 5th round pick on a quarterback that you can get in round 7, when instead you could get a good wide receiver that could end up being the next JSN. And I'm going to say that later in the video. Number 4, don't draft a kicker or a defense, because my defenses, I never stuck to a single defense. I say defenses is plural, because what I did was I took a defense last year, which I shouldn't have done that. I'm not drafting defenses anymore because if you followed like a bad opponent, which is what I did, like take the Dolphins for this year, just take the Dolphins opponent's defense every single time, like every single week, and you're gonna be fine. Take a bad offense, get their opponent's defense every single week, you're gonna be okay. You're gonna get more points than if you drafted a single defense and just rocked with them the whole season, like even a solid defense. And same thing with kickers. Just take a kicker that belongs to a good offense, like Evan McPherson, or just a decent offense, but not a guy that's gonna be draft worthy. Just look at all the guys off of waivers and see who has the best offense and who's reliable, doesn't have issues. You haven't seen him miss a bunch of kicks before, and just take them. If it changes from week to week, so what? Kickers, they're so hit or miss whether they're good or not. It's not that important to get Brandon Aubrey. I mean, I drafted Brandon Aubrey a lot, but trust me, it's not that important. Games, if they are decided by a couple points, it's the couple points that comes in with drafting the flex players. Speaking of those guys, use the extra picks. So, if you always pick a defense in your last round of the draft, don't do that. Instead, take a wide receiver or a running back, and then pair that wide receiver that you just picked in the last round, pair that with another wide receiver, and do a 2-for-1 trade for a better wide receiver compared to the two you traded away. And that will free up a spot while also giving you a better wide receiver. And then you can use that spot to pick up a defense or a kicker or whatever you need. That's going to be a way better strategy than just selecting a defense or a kicker. You want all of the flex players with you, because if one of them breaks out, you need to have them on your team and not have to trade for them. Number 5, prioritize younger players over older vets in the late rounds. And it's really hard for me to explain this, so I'm going to just give you some examples. Okay, take Jacoby Lane and Keenan Allen. They're in the same skill position room, but Keenan Allen's old and washed, while Jacoby Lane, he's a rookie. Okay, Jacoby Lane has a higher percentage of breaking out than Keenan Allen does. And Keenan Allen, we're not talking about the Keenan Allen a couple years ago where he was really awesome, but we are talking about a young Jacoby Lane who has the ability to be pretty good. And he's also not a startable wide receiver. So if you're choosing a guy, this is what mainly in the context that I mean. I don't mean go take Carnell Tate over Puka Nacua. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I'm taking both of these two wide receivers, Jacoby Lane and Keenan Allen, are going to be guys that you're considering unless you're in a really very big league. But if you're in a 16+ team league, don't be watching this video. But if you're in a small league and you're thinking about Jacoby Lane or Keenan Allen, deciding between who you want on your bench, take Jacoby Lane, because Jacoby Lane can be turned into a starter. Keenan Allen cannot. And so what if Jacoby Lane busts and fails, and he's not a good even bench player? He's just not worthy of being on the roster. So what? He's a bench player. Go grab a different one off of waivers. At least you tried. At least you had him just in case he did break out. Also, Jadarian Price over Rico Dowdle, Kenyon Sadiq over Tommy Tremble or Dalen Waller, whoever the Panthers end up starting a tight end that's old, Take the guys that have a potential to break out over guys that are past their prime. Rookies that are taken in later rounds are unproven, which can be a good or a bad thing, but if you are taking rookies to fill your bench, that's not a bad strategy. Don't be the guy that misses out on the next JSN because you wanted Stephon Diggs. I remember drafting just JSN, and I already had my guys. I think it was 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 2 flex players. I had those 6 already filled out. Jackson Smith and Jigba was the first guy I took to place on my bench, and it was worth it because he was a young guy last year. And he hadn't broken out yet. He was just on my bench. If he met expectations, he was going to be a bench player. But he exceeded those. And he became the second best wide receiver in fantasy, which was so worth it. So don't miss out on JSN because you want an old guy like Stephon Diggs, who's going to be decent, but he's not going to be a top 5 wide receiver. He doesn't have that potential because he's old. So, listen to my advice. Don't take a Diggs, take a JSN type player. Listen, these tips aren't to teach you how to draft. these teams, I messed up the whole catchphrase, bro. I literally hit it both times last video. Just forget that happened. These tips are not to teach you who to draft, but how to draft. If you are consistently checking the waiver wires and you are taking these tips, it's going to be very easy for you. You need to pair the waiver wire consistency with these tips. If you, because fantasy drafts change a lot, players go rounds earlier and rounds later, and if you're in multiple leagues, but every draft you're in is going to be a different situation. Different players are going to be available to you. But if you take these tips of identifying who is a good player to grab and which one's the better player to grab, in 30 seconds you can identify who is the guy worth that pick and who is the best option that is available pretty easily if you just take these 5 tips. Don't take a defense or kicker. Don't consider them until waivers. Don't take a quarterback early. If Patrick Mahomes is on the board in round 4, don't be excited. That's not, even if fantasy's trying to shove him down your throat, being like, this is the best guy available. He's not the best guy available. Take a better guy that can break out and is actually valuable in a very rare skill position kind of thing that has a lot of startable spots that he can fill. And just apply my other tips too. Trust me, you won't be regretting it. And if you're consistent, you'll probably make the playoffs. So, yeah, please just do everything I said. Pay attention to waivers, and yeah, you'll win the championship and win every game. Goodbye.